Just strap her to a chair and pour water.
Tell us
over.
why
do you flash a light in her eyes? Why do you use Don't Rivet?
Now it's just me and the voices inside of my head. I want a cheese toasty. Talking at a normal volume, this seems to appear nicely.
What is normal volume?
I'm feeling slow and mind frazzled today.
My head hurts. We should start writing the next season, not next season's, next semester's worth of work
soon. Hello.
And welcome to episode 4 of Back to the Drawing Board. My name is Phil Wanter-Smith. I'm an architect and director at PWS Architecture and Design, Northeast residential-based practice. And this is my yawning intern, Theo.
Hello.
I'm going to top your coffee up, mate.
I tell you what, that's my second one already. I'm going to be bouncing off the walls in a minute.
Yeah, you need to up that tolerance.
I know,
big
mate.
Time.
Well, I also have only had a bowl of cornflakes for breakfast, but I had almond milk, so that makes me an environmental hero, probably.
I don't know, does it? Because I thought almonds had really bad implications on environmentalism because of the amount of water they use or something. Or is that avocados? I'm pretty sure it's almonds.
I don't know, mate.
You should Google it. we did have a plan for this episode, but unfortunately we've not even introduced it and we're on a tangent.
We're now talking about almonds. Yeah.
So today's episode, we're talking about almonds.
No, today actually is going to be really entertaining for all of you. It's a bit of a comedy episode. We're going to be talking about software and hardware requirements, and basically we're not going to be like okay.
This is less exciting than the past ones, we hope.
Yeah.
Well, I say we
hope.
We hope the last ones are very exciting. This one is going to be somewhat exciting.
Not like a serious talk, but not like an entertaining talk, but just something basically. If you're looking for like a new laptop or kind of a new bit of hardware, we want to help you be able to work out what to buy. So we're not going to say like buy this, because everyone's got different needs, but we want to actually say this is how you can work out what to get.
And
I think that makes sense.
This would be good for anyone either starting uni, looking for a new laptop for uni or whatever, or someone starting their own practice, unless you're leaving your old practice with one of the computers for some reason. You're going to need to buy one.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we've kind of set this up into a few different things. So Phil's gone and had a look at actually the requirements for kind of the standard softwares. So like SketchUp, I believe, Revit, AutoCAD,
Revit.
Yeah.
I've even put ArchiCAD on there because I've been getting a lot of emails recently and a lot of adverts for ArchiCAD. So I figure they're probably trying to put some sort of campaign together to get more people using it. In which case, if more people are using it, we might as well give them the information they need.
And then I've looked into kind of the actual hardware itself and like what all this software jargon means. What the hell is a CPU? And I thought a RAM was an animal, not an amount of memory and whatnot.
Random access memory.
Mm-mm. So, I mean, how do we get into this? Interestingly,
I don't know. There's no interesting way to do it.
There's not, and we're sorry about that. But stick with us. And subscribe to our Patreon, £1 a month. No, all right, I'm going to jump into this. Basically, I've looked into a kind of the stuff you can get on laptops, desktop computers, monitors, and a little bit on tablets, although there's not too much to say there. They all kind of share certain things, but I've kind of gone for like where it's most relevant. So like laptops and desktop computers, they all share basically the same stuff, but desktop has a bit more. So I'm going to start on laptops. What is a CPU? Did I actually...
Computer processing units?
Yeah. I can't believe I didn't look up for the initial definition. That's quite funny.
If it's not computer processing unit, cut all this out and make me look dead clever.
I'll be massively... It's central processing unit. Is that what you said? Or did you say computer?
No, I said computer.
You dafty.
God damn it.
Anyway, what the hell has just happened? Oh, you put a table on, mate. That's cool. It affects how quickly...
Not just a pretty face.
Your device...
And an ass that won't quit.
...can process information. A CPU affects how quickly your device can process your information. So basically, a better processing chip will allow the device to perform more kind of draining tasks with greater ease. So you could have a bigger folder on SketchUp open doing some crazy shizzle. There's kind of like two standard chips here within a laptop, and that's your Intels and your M1s.
Yay!
Yeah.
M2's come out this year.
Did they?
Yeah.
All right. Well, the M
M
chips
series,
are all
the silicon
Apple,
based.
and Intel is kind of Windows stuff. So in Intel, you can get an i5, i7, and an i9. Obviously, the higher the number is, the more it's got. If you could find a laptop with an i5 in, don't get it.
It's probably worth mentioning as
More
well,
insane.
though, that yeah, I mean, we'll get into it when we get to the requirements, but a lot of the minimum requirements started at like i5. You don't want to be aiming for the thing you've got to think of is if the information I'll give you is based on the recommended, but if you go for the minimum,
You're going to be upgrading very quickly.
yeah. And so, I mean, one of the rules I've always had when I've bought web software, hardware, has always been buy obviously the best you can afford, but push yourself for it, because at the end of the day, spending a few £100 every year versus spending a couple of grand over
once.
6 or 7 years, in the long run it works out more cost effective.
Yeah.
It's also probably worth mentioning that if you buy older MacBooks, this one has, for those of you who are listening on the podcast and can see what I'm pointing at, this particular MacBook that's in front of me, this one runs an i9 because it's a 2000 and I want to say 18, whereas Theo's is with the M1 Max, 2022, because I bought it for you last year, didn't I?
This one's an absolute monster.
Yeah, so if cost is a concern, you can always get a refurb. If you want to go for a MacBook, which is probably where, if someone's looking to cut costs but get something of high quality, get a refurbished MacBook, because most Windows computers are cheap enough already. They don't need, no one needs to be buying them refurbished.
Yeah. But yeah, so the i9 is the best chip Intel currently offers, and the M1 is the lowest chip Apple offers and is almost equivalent to the i9, kind of in terms of what they can do. I had a look at comparisons, and that was kind of what they can do. The M1 Pro is 4 M1 chips, so it's already 4 times better than Intel's best chip, and the M1 Max is is it 4 M1 Pros, or is it just 16 M1s?
I'm sure it goes Pro, which is 4, then is it not Ultra or something? I'm sure there's one in between that goes to, like, I don't know, but there's...
As far as I'm aware, it's the Pro and the Max, and the Max is like essentially 16 times greater than Intel's best chip.
And it's probably worth noting, while we're on that subject, that I've got, which again... Actually, no, even if you're watching this on video, you can't see it. But if you're watching this on the podcast, there's an iMac behind me, which is in my corner of my office, which that just runs an M1. And so far, I mean, I've run a lot of things at once, and it's been fine. So obviously, getting things like the M1 Max is going to be, or the Pro even, is going to be an absolute beast.
What I'll say is do you know what that the MacBook I was borrowing from you first had? Did that have an i7 in or something? Hannah's old MacBook.
It would have been... I could go get it, but it'd take a while. Well, it wouldn't take a while to charge at all. I think it was an i5.
Right,
Because
okay.
we didn't get one that was particularly powerful, because all she was doing was Word documents.
Yeah, well, this one with the Max in is an absolute monster, and I can have Enscape open, rendering stuff at the same time as SketchUp on a big project, and I can have that just like in the background while I'm working on CAD, and it doesn't notice.
Yeah,
it's absolutely mad.
Well, I can be running three monitors on that, so my iPad, my spare monitor, my iMac, with 3 or 4 SketchUps, one Enscape, CAD, watching videos, listening to music, even having music videos on, watching TV in the background, all sorts.
And this downloads stuff,
and that's just an M1. Like that one's like that's 16 times better.
This downloads stuff crazy fast as well. I mean, when Phil's sending me the video files, and they'll be like 10 gigabytes big, and that it will take like a minute for me to transfer it around.
Yeah,
it's insane. But yeah, what I'll say is, if you're going for something with an M1 in, it's already gonna be better. And it's just faster, like almost objectively speaking.
Yeah.
Next up, we've got RAM.
Random access memory.
Basically, as far as I'm aware, it's how much memory can be working at once. It's your ability to...
How much memory can be randomly accessed?
Yeah.
Some might say.
So my best way of describing it is essentially how many tabs you can have open on your browser, and you can have more open if you've got more RAM, because it can have more memory going at once.
Yeah.
So it allows more windows to be open before performance takes a hit.
Yep.
And it's measured in bytes. Obviously, if it's not measured in gigabytes, if it's measured in anything less, don't even look at it. But I think a standard is like 8.
Yeah, so I think most things
gigs.
start at 8, and then I think I've got 32, and I think you've got 64 off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I think within the M1s, it's called unified memory rather than RAM. So when you start looking at M1s and they start throwing these ridiculous terms at you,
Yeah.
I think when they say unified memory, it's pretty much RAM.
In fairness, so
To a
what I was
degree.
saying before about having
Slightly
the different projects open, I think that's more on the RAM side. In terms of the actual CPU, that's I can have a bigger project open before it takes a hit. But yeah, RAM allows you to have more stuff open.
Yeah, doing more things at once.
Now then you go into your SSDs and your HDDs, which is like the actual storage, how much you can just have on it.
So SSD, solid state drive, and HDD, hard disk drive. I think you'd be hard pressed to find in a new unit, in a new computer, you'd be hard pressed to find a hard disk drive these days.
SSD is
It's
just
more
generally
and more
considered
common, yeah.
better.
It is considerably so much quicker.
Right. And I mean that's the amount of storage you have. Like that's personal. I know we upload a lot of our documents and
we use a cloud
stuff
for a lot
to
of things.
the cloud, so we don't need as much storage. This has hardly anything for what it is.
I think
this is 500 gigabytes.
If you go to your little Apple logo at the top and then press about this Mac. Yeah, I've got didn't realise I had this much. Okay, hello. I've got 32 gigs of RAM. More info. There you go. So
yeah, I've got 500 gigabytes of storage.
Yeah,
which isn't loads.
It's not a lot
for architecture, certainly, because obviously all your projects are going to be taking up a lot.
Yeah,
Like
but that's why we use the cloud for everything, because
Yeah.
we've got unlimited space in the cloud.
I've hardly used this, and I've got 30 gigabytes left.
Really?
Yeah. So
Are you downloading everything from the cloud onto there?
So for my personal stuff, I don't have it upload on the cloud, so I'm going to set all that up.
You know when I said to you when I got it, do you want more memory, or are you just going to use the cloud? And you went, use the cloud, Phil.
Well,
I'm going cool.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to set up a cloud document for my uni work as well.
Well, this has got a terabyte on.
Oh,
and
lovely.
this has everything downloaded to it, including all my personal files, and that's got 340 gigabytes available.
So the point is, your SSD it's more of a personal choice, but if you're going to be keeping stuff on your hard drive, then you're going to want more.
And if you think to yourself, I'd probably use I'll be close to 500, I'll probably have 400, get a terabyte. Go for the one above what you think you need. I thought I'd need a half terabyte, and I bought a terabyte on this. And then my iMac has a half terabyte because I know loads of it goes on the cloud. I only download the things I'm working on at once, so I'll only have 30 or 40 projects on that. Plus, obviously, the whichever video for these is coming up soon.
Yeah.
So I'll have 2 or 3 of the videos going, so I'm not using that much. And then we've got the downloads folder, which is just full of absolute nothingness.
Yeah. So you've got your obviously CPU. That's how big of a project you can kind of run. You've got your RAM. That's like how many you can run, and then you've got your SSD, which is how much you can just have downloading onto your computer. In terms of something which applies to everything, screen size. That's such a personal choice. Obviously,
and it'll depend on what you get.
Yeah.
Because you can get the 13 or the 16-inch MacBook, or the 12 and 15 if you get an older one. iMacs come standard at 24.
Phil only knows about Apple.
Yeah.
You can do this all on Windows as well.
Yeah, I think all Windows are standard at... Well, I think
you can get 16-inch.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know that things like anywhere between, I think 11 I've seen before for the little micro ones. But you can get anything from 11 up to 17 as a standard, I think. Or 17 used to be the standard.
One great thing about Windows, which it kind of would make it preferable over Apple, is Windows is completely customizable.
Yeah.
You've
got so much more choice as well.
Apple is non-customizable. Apple, you get what you're given. Windows, you get what you're given, and then can get something else and just stick that. You can rip your screen off, put a new one on if you know how.
Yeah, well, the thing with Windows is you've got essentially everyone. Apple only supplies Apple, whereas with Windows-based computers, the operating system and the components that go into it can go into Alienware, Dell, HP. All of that all-encompass thing, whereas Apple's just one place.
So it means Apple runs smoother, but if you find there's something you don't like, there's nothing you can do about it.
You're screwed.
Yeah. Whereas
Actually,
obviously-
you could buy, which we'll get into, but you could buy a MacBook or a Mac and just run Parallels. And I think I read a thing on it that said Windows runs more efficiently through Parallels than it does on a Windows computer because of the chips in the M1s and stuff.
yeah, but
Madness.
if you read a positive review about Windows, you'd ignore it.
That
Windows.
is very good. That's not true.
Yeah, it is.
It's not. I see the benefits of them. I'm too deep down the rabbit hole now. if I'd stopped,
Too stubborn.
yeah, and that. But if I stopped having a MacBook, I feel like I'd have to get rid of my iPads, plural, my iPhone, my watch, my Apple Pencil. What else have I got? My headphones,
Your Apple House.
my Apple House. I'd have to get rid of everything.
You'd have to start eating bananas, mate.
No.
So now it's kind of like moving on to the things desktop computers that just laptops don't have. So there's a few extra choices for your CPU.
To be said, by the way, you'd probably find more students use a laptop.
Yeah,
and most professionals use the desktop.
Yeah. Because obviously, if you're a student, you're not going to want to carry your desktop computer into the studio with you.
Although I wonder what the weight difference is between that iMac and that MacBook.
I
I'm not saying we start carrying iMacs into studios, but it was just a thought that popped in to my head.
But yeah, so things you need to think about is you've got a few extra choices for your CPU. Like you get the i3, which is a step below the i5. On a desktop, they come with a whole bunch of extra numbers and letters at the end of it, but essentially it's the 3, 5, and the 7, which you need to focus on because that's your power. And then you also get your Intel Pentium, which is one step greater. And then you've got AMD, which does your Athlon, which is a brand. You've got Ryzen 3, 5, and 7. Ryzen, I looked at it, and it's apparently a little bit worse than Intel.
So is Intel
Intel's the best, I think, for Windows.
Without doing my usual trick, that's probably why Apple used Intel, because it's the more expensive and probably the higher performing chips, and then they can put their markup on it. So you're paying Intel prices plus Apple's 100% markup.
Yeah. Obviously, so in desktop, you can kind of get a choice about the amount of CPUs, and this is where Windows will help because you could probably just stack and stack and stack that. But the more cores you have, the better. If you have 2 cores, you've got twice as much power. If you have 4 cores, you have 4 times as much power. It's as simple as that.
I'm 6 core on this, 6 core i9. But then the gigahertz as well makes a difference.
But yeah, the way, obviously, more crap cores still has the potential to be less powerful than less good cores. But yeah, that's something you can do with your desktop, is you can actually stack that properly, and even more. Graphics card is something you kind of worry more, unless you're getting a gaming laptop. But I'd say within architecture, you don't really need to worry about your graphics card.
Yeah.
It sounds weird, but within graphic design, if you're looking at a stationary project,
stationary images,
it's not as important.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the high-end 3D complex stuff probably requires it a bit. Obviously, again, something we'll probably speak about when we get into the actual software requirements, but it's not a huge... I've never had an issue with graphics.
One thing I'll say is because Apple is so directed towards kind of media and graphic design, their graphics card isn't superior compared to stuff you could get for your Windows PCs. I
mean, I've got a Radeon Pro Vega 20 4GB in this and a Intel UHD graphics 630-1536 MB. I'm assuming that's 1,536 megabytes. For whatever that means for anyone, that's what this iMac runs, and I've never had an issue, ever. I've never, ever had an issue with it.
I haven't really said too much about this because, as I say, it's not too important. If you're looking into gaming laptops and that kind of thing...
all I play is RuneScape and Sims.
Yeah, if you're looking into gaming,
well.
watch a different podcast.
This is for architects.
Yeah. But I know NVIDIA do a range of cards.
And architecture students.
Oh my God,
Patreon,
you're interrupted today, aren't you? This is usually my job to interrupt you. The RTX is the newest of NVIDIA, and so that's like the best. But really, if you want to focus on your graphics card and your gaming, go somewhere else.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be too helpful there. Monitors, and here's some things which are on the others which I haven't really said. Your resolution. Your full HD is 1080p. Don't settle for less, honestly. You can get one for like 80, 90 quid at 1080p. At this point, if you're going for less, you're on a budget of like a tenner. I'd say
it's not worth it.
It's not worth it, especially with a monitor. You want it so that you've got good detail. There's no point going for less.
I mean, that monitor there next to my iMac is 1080p, and the only issue I've got with it is it's sat next to the iMac. Yeah, the iMac's like 5K or whatever it is, 4K, 5K, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it looks awful, but just think to yourself how often and how long you're going to be staring at that. And there are like cases of people who've got seriously bad eye strain from looking at crap monitors all their lives. Obviously, it's getting better as you go, but yeah, I would say 1080p is the minimum.
And 4K, if you're looking for a monitor on a budget, don't look at 4K. No. It starts at 400 quid. That's what I generally found.
That's what I put in for the Christmas gift guide was
to find a 4K budget monitor, you have to already have a lot of money and not actually be on a budget.
Again, it'd be probably looking for refurbished. But I think what we do is quite a visual medium. You know, you spend a lot of time, particularly when you're a student, you spend a lot of time doing these high-end visuals, rendering, doing stuff like that, you know, photo collaging things, setting up presentation boards. Obviously you do that in practice as well, but you need something to be able to see it in detail. And it might not be that whoever you present it to sees it in the same detail, but if they are, and you're working to a lower spec and it looks crap on their monitor, you're not going to sell a project very well.
Yeah. So to put a bit of context to all that, the resolution is the amount of pixels the screen can actually display. So 1080 isn't like, it can't. I think that's the amount of displays in the width, but they don't bother saying the height. But yeah, obviously, the bigger your number, the more pixels you can display at once. 4K is like, actually, it looks real. It looks like real life. I've compared this because I recently got a 1080p monitor, and putting it next to it, like the 1080 is very, very nice, but this is insane. Yeah. This is actually, 4K is insane. So yeah, the difference is definitely noticeable in terms of quality of image, but so is it. It's also noticeable in price.
Well, this one's a Retina display on this one. For a 15.4 inch Retina display built in, 2880 by 1800.
Oh, nice.
I know.
So yeah, basically, a bigger number is a more detailed and a more lifelike image.
Yeah.
So the refresh rate, which is also sometimes known as the frequency, is measured in hertz, and it's how quickly the pixels on the screen can refresh themselves. So it kind of, if you imagine it as like a flick book, if it's got higher value for its hertz, so say 140, it will feel like a much faster flick book. Whereas if it's something lower like 60, it will feel a lot more like da 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 da. Like it will feel more animated. So it's usually, I think standard is about 60. And that's what runs through a HDMI cable, which we'll get to in a minute. So that's kind of what you'd expect as standard. If you want something higher, you've got to go for something else. But the higher it is, the more smooth the whole thing will feel. And it's really ideal for graphic design because it basically means it will just feel less pixelated when you're designing something. Now, the next thing is the response time. And this is where I personally kind of don't quite get the difference. But hopefully if I say it right, you guys will. And response time is important for gaming, and that's how quickly it can refresh new colors on the screen. So not every image, not every pixel, but actually refresh individual pixels. So if it's got a higher response time, it will allow for faster changes of colors. If it's lower, you might start to see like black zones as you're moving around. So say you're on a game like Call of Duty and you quickly like turn around. If it can't update those colors, if it can't update those colors quick enough, you'll start to see black spots. And I mean, response times are so low, it's like measured in milliseconds. But
I usually see black spots when I don't drink enough coffee.
Yeah. But if that's again something you'd worry about more if you're going for gaming. Obviously, it's nice as well if you're going to watch a movie or something. Yeah. But usually it's a low enough response time anyway. You'll be fine. But yeah, it's when you get to gaming where you kind of want to worry about that. So video output, this is what I've mentioned about HDMI, and the standard is 60 hertz. If you want something faster than that, which I'd say for graphic design, it can be nicer, although you are kind of getting picky at that point, then you want to go for a display port. and that's much higher. That I think it can allow up to 144 hertz.
Right.
So I've got a monitor which does 75 hertz. So I'm getting an adapter for this so that I can actually run it at a higher frequency.
Could you not run it on a Thunderbolt rather than?
No.
Right, because I didn't know whether. Right, fine. I didn't know whether or not you'd be able to, because that one does. I can't remember what, but it just goes through Thunderbolt and it works fine.
No, mine.
It like operates itself, or Thunderbolt's faster or some shit.
Right.
I don't know.
No, I know DisplayPort's meant to be like absolutely wicked, and kind of again, if you're going for gaming, that's something to really consider. Is it DisplayPort capable?
In terms of when you say gaming, it's also applicable to when you do big 3D site models and you're doing walkthroughs of people's houses. It's probably going to be or buildings if you're not doing people's houses.
Yeah,
it's going to be handy for that as well.
Exactly,
because it's a similar sort of idea.
Absolutely. So then another thing to consider, and this is more in terms of the monitors, but you get this on all the other devices, but like the fun features. So some can like twist and swivel so you can have it portrait, which can be good for reading documents. I'd say that's not like super important, but if you're going to spend a lot of time looking at documents, it can make it more ideal for reading. Some can be wall mounted, so if you want a whole wall mounted setup, that's something to consider. Like if you're not actually buying one that's not capable of that, you're going to regret it when it comes to having it. Some have speakers and webcams. Those are the kind of things where it's like they're not going to be particularly high quality, but if that's not something you're worried about, then great. Well, Phil's giving me a funny look here
because he's about to say the word Apple.
No, if you're getting a speaker on a monitor compared to an actual speaker. Well, even on this, where the speakers are insane, compared to an actual speaker, they're not going to be as good.
Yeah, I suppose it's an individual thing. But I thought I was going to say. Oh, with what you're saying about wall mounting, you can buy kits to wall mount those as well. So anyone's looking to wall mount an Apple product, you can do it. I've never seen it done, actually.
Yeah.
I thought about it once in the old place and then was like...
But I'd say that is something to consider, is the mounting abilities and how you can position it. If you can put it up higher, lower, change the angle, because that's great for ergonomics and actually for not breaking your neck looking at your monitor. Which
is why I use a standing desk, because I can raise and lower, and I can obviously tilt it on the desk.
Mine's basically like got 360 movement on it. It's awesome.
But yeah,
it's wicked. Tablets is the next thing. I struggled to find anything about specifications in tablets, at which point Phil came out with the wisdom of get the best you can afford.
Yeah.
And they're
not going to be your workhorse.
Yeah.
You're not going to... The main thing I've found with tablets is actually been getting more memory in them, because especially if you're using Apple, you've got everything, like, the pictures I take on my phone transfer to my iPad. So when I'm doing a survey or something and I take a photo or a video of someone's house or whatever, it then transfers. So it's all on kind of a lot of places at once. So just make sure you've got a decent amount of memory.
The reason I had to do the bulk of this is because if Phil did it, you would only hear about one brand. And we have to kind of try slightly to be unbiased.
That's not true.
It's so true.
It's definitely not.
But basically, as Phil was saying, you can do so much on a tablet, and unfortunately, I'm about to do Phil's move. As far as I'm aware, with iPads, it's so much like more capable because of the ecosystem. Yay. You can share your screen wirelessly. You can AirDrop things with complete ease.
You can use it as a graphics tablet.
You can use CAD on it so that you can actually use it to do your surveys on. They can be so versatile compared to the other devices.
Yeah, one thing that I'm trying to get more into now is taking an iPad mini to do surveys, because what we record on is an iPad Pro, and that's what I do a lot of my presentations with. So if I go to someone's house, I'll take this laptop, I'll take that Pro, and I'll display my screen onto theirs so I can point the mouse and click and interact with it for them. And we can show them the model in 3 dimensions. So I'll have the SketchUp one open on here, and I'll have the Enscape one open on there.
Yeah.
But I've now looking into taking so I'm trying to digitize everything to a point. So taking a mini on site so I can draw up surveys and it's instantly in the folder instead of having to flick back through sketchbooks. But yeah, they're a really powerful tool, but they're a tool. They're not. You won't be using them every day. On that note, you've then got things like the Windows or the Dell. I'm sure there's a Dell where it's like a tablet PC, like it's a laptop, but it's touchscreen. You can fold it and flip it. Those look really, really cool.
So
I've yet to ever use one.
I've got a friend who has one actually, and she says it's really good for like. So yeah, she folds it in half. When you fold it in half, the keyboard turns itself off, and then you can use it as like a stand as well, so you can just tap away. And she says actually, when she's not just writing out an essay, it can be really nice to use it like that for if you're doing something drawing or if you're just watching a film on it, if you wanted to use it as a monitor.
I mean, these days, really with the way the technology is and that, you probably don't, if you're doing, I don't know why you'd be listening to this podcast if you are, but if you're doing a heavily writing-based type course, you could probably get away with just having a tablet
that folds in half
with a keyboard. And like I know, you can get Apple cases that have got keyboards in, or you can have a separate USB one, like the ones that we use for the iMacs. You can use these mice with them. So that's good. But like I think you were saying there, sketching on them. That's the other thing I use mine for is, well, I've got two. I use the old one because I've got the old one's got a paper-like, it's called, screen protector on, and I use my Apple Pencil and I draw concept sketches and all that sort of stuff and diagrams. I draw on that, and it's again really useful tool for stuff like that. But
certainly a very versatile type of device. Yeah,
not a necessity, a really useful tool to have. But if you had to choose between, like if someone said to you, doesn't matter what the cost is, we're buying you only one or the other, get a computer, for the love of God.
Just because it's certainly if you're doing design, it's going to be more powerful.
Yeah, it's going to be so much more useful.
Yeah. Now, the final thing I've put on here is a little bit of a kind of, not Apple versus Windows, but the pros and cons. That
what we're going to do is set up a boxing ring. He's going to put a Windows logo on him. I'm going to put an Apple logo on him, and I'm going to kick his ass.
No, so Apple will generally stay functional and like quicker for longer.
In our experience,
they last longer. The ecosystem, blah, blah, blah. It allows for seamless transfers of media between devices. They're like a super weapon for people working in media.
And they look sexier.
And it looks sexier.
And it's not, that's objective. I'm not taking that as a subjective comment. That is objective.
Yeah. Problems, though, they're not customizable. No. And they're not designed for gaming at all.
No.
So you can, like, if you've got a powerful enough one, you could run a game off it, but it would be stupid in comparison to actually buying yourself.
Well, you've run games off that, haven't you?
Not off this one, actually. I started trying, and then I couldn't because you can only download it onto Windows.
Really?
Yeah. But I got City Skylines on the other one.
What a crock of shit that they only make games. I got really animated there. That's awful that they just make, because it annoys me that they only make Revit.
Apple doesn't allow you to run it. It's not that it's only designed for Windows, it's that Apple won't allow you to run a lot of the games.
Why?
Because of mods and because of the customizations that you have to be able to run through the games. Apple doesn't design its computers for games, so it doesn't allow you to download most of them. Yeah.
That's bizarre, but okay.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not a gaming computer to the point where actually you'd have to boot camp your laptop, your
all parallels.
Mac, yeah, so that it would let you download it because it's not actually designed for it. Windows is customizable.
Yeah.
If you could buy a cheaper Windows laptop and then buy expensive parts to go into it, it would be a bit of a backwards way compared to buying an expensive laptop and just upgrading bits. But you can do that. And you can generally find a Windows device of a similar spec to an Apple device for a much lower cost. The difference being it probably won't last as long.
Yeah.
They generally kind of have a shorter lifespan, or they need replacements here and there. But yeah, they're so customizable. You can get it perfectly to suit your like exact needs.
Yeah.
Transferring media between Windows devices, generally a lot slower. If I want to send someone a picture of like the maximum quality between two Windows devices, I'd have to email it to them. I can't just quickly send an airdrop.
Yeah.
And even then, it's going to be lower quality, you know. If we were doing this off Windows devices, it would take forever for us to send files between. Whereas on Apple, it's literally just a click of a button and it's done.
Yeah.
So looking from a media and from a graphic communication perspective, Apple products generally have that kind of boost.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at uni, more and more people towards the end were using MacBooks, and it could be a number of reasons, but it seems to be a lot of. There's a bit. My issue with Apple is there's a bit of a click about it. Like Hannah got one for writing Word documents.
That's what I'd say. Think about what you actually need it for, because
it's a bit of a cult thing, though. It's like I've got one, and people like to sit in Starbucks with their MacBooks out and write, and I get it. I do get it. Obviously, I'm the one here that's advocating the most for Apple, probably, but sometimes it's overkill. But if you want to be part of it, you want it as a statement, and you want to actually have one. Like,
if I didn't do design, I would get a nice looking Windows PC. For like, if I did something that was essay based, I would go for a nice looking Windows PC. That's lightweight. Probably Dell does nice looking stuff, you know.
they do the Apple copy.
I think they're probably the closest in terms of aesthetic.
Yeah. I'd just get an iPad with a keyboard if I was just doing Word based things.
Yeah, tablet with a keyboard is probably a smart move. Like I understand, as you say, from that cult perspective, but if you're doing things essay based, I don't get why people go for Apple.
I don't understand it other than wanting to. I mean, most people have probably got an iPhone, and then for them it's the logical solution to get everything of the same brand, which I understand, because that's the situation I'm in. What have you done?
Man, I think I just speak deeper, because my levels come out much lower.
Yeah.
Mine's just basic frequencies. Oh, yeah.
My darling,
getting up
your love, babe.
So now that we've gone through that and you actually understand, hopefully, what all that hardware actually means, we're going to get into basically what Phil spotted from like the general standards and suggestions for what hardware you should look for when buying a device.
So I'm going to run through. There's obviously more softwares available than what we're going to run through, but I've kind of picked the ones that I kind of see as the industry standard. So we've got CAD and SketchUp, which is what I use, and then we've got Revit, which I do not use, but I have used in the past, and as well as a solution to use Revit on Mac. So I've got friends who actually work in practices that do that, apparently, which I was speaking to one the other day, and it just popped up in conversation.
You know what I've just realised, which I'm going to really hate?
What?
I've left one of the chairs in.
Oh well.
Isn't that a disaster?
Yeah.
If you're on the podcast, you won't mind. Oh, no, they'll see it on the podcast.
Yeah,
if you're on the
you'll
YouTube,
see it on the podcast. If you're on the
YouTube or the Patreon, subscribe for £1.
Yeah, £1 minimum. Or £10 if you want to write off some VAT.
Please.
We could go for more if you want to write off more VAT. Just drop us a quick email at askus@backtothethrowingboard.uk. Also, ArchiCAD, Lumion, V-Ray, and I think I got Enscape on here as well. That's probably what is at the bottom.
I'm so hungry, man.
I'll make you some food later.
Thank you.
So, I'll try and run through this as quick and as excitingly as I can, but I will advise that this is going to be dry as hell.
I might go play with the dogs while you do this.
No. Because then I want to play with the dogs and they'll start making noise, and then this will all turn to shit. So,
to poop.
So I'm not going to run through operating systems for all of these, because if you're not running most operating, like a more up-to-date operating system, you need a new computer anyway.
Yeah.
The rest of it's probably outdated, which means you won't have the right amount of processor memory or whatever. So just make sure you've got an up-to-date Windows 11 or 10, whatever's the most recent, and having your Mac, which is running whatever, Monterey, Big Sur, Catalina, or Mojave seem to be the ones that everyone mentions. But again, make sure you've got the most up-to-date thing. Just makes sense. So, your basic processing needs for CAD on a Windows computer. I'm starting with Windows and working into Mac, so I won't hear anything about me having a preference there. So the basic processor, 2.5 to 2.9 gigahertz, and it's recommended to have 3 plus gigahertz, which is fair, although I think that's probably overkill, because CAD is just lines. It's just lines and circles. Just lines and circles. 8 gigabytes, but recommended to have 16 gig. And then basically your displays as Theo's mentioned before, get the best one that you can kind of afford, but always again aim for something that's in the 1080p range. So
just don't go below that, please.
For some unknown reason,
for your own sake, don't go below that.
For some unknown reason on this, it says we recommend a 4K display
on CAD.
For CAD, oh yeah,
it's lines.
Yep, lines that are colours.
I'd get that for one of your rendering softwares, but not for.
Imagine that. And then we get into things like
720
display card, 4 gigabytes GPU with 106 gigabytes a second bandwidth. I don't know what the hell any of that means.
I don't know what that means.
And they expect you to have 10 gigabytes of disk space. If you only have 10 gigabytes of disk space on your computer, you are in trouble. And then I like this bit where it tells you pointing device, a mouse. Yeah, you don't say.
That's pretty good.
But then again,
Mice.
Mises.
Mouse eye.
Reese's for Mises. I don't know.
Anyway, make sure you got a mouse if you're doing graphic design.
Yeah, and so we'll move on to Mac CAD. Move on to CAD for Mac. By the way, these are all 2022 editions. So by the time this is released in 2023, comes out tomorrow probably, knowing our luck. Again, it basically just says
you've gone up from the minimum bit though, haven't you? With the consideration of you probably shouldn't be getting just the minimum.
Yeah, so I've got whenever I'm giving these, I'm giving the recommended, not the minimums, because like you say, it'll be out of date by the time the next generation, if it comes out. It pretty much just says, any Apple Mac models supporting Metal Graphics Engine. Apple Mac models with M-Series chips are supported under Rosetta 2. For those of you who don't know, Rosetta is kind of, because of the way M1 silica chips are, there's a lot of weird compatibility things, so Rosetta is kind of the middleman between Intel and the M1. It's a really weird thing, but I haven't really had that many problems with it. I mean, I know they've blamed Rosetta for a lot of things, but I think it's just a lot of catching
Rosetta, just going for all of the different Toto songs. All 2 of them.
Rosanna.
Honestly,
I was like, in my head, I was like, I'm sure that's the right word, but I was like, it's not. It doesn't sound right. That really hurt my head. Again, recommending an i7 or M1 memory-wise, so unified memory or RAM, 8 gigabytes, which just seems overkill for CAD. Again, displays, it just says any.
It fast, in fairness.
It basically says here on the display resolution, just any Mac display, and then. Strangely enough, you only need 4 gigabytes of storage, not 10.
That is weird.
It is weird, isn't it? And then for a pointing device, guys, make sure that you've got a mouse.
Why have you included a pointing device?
Because it just made me laugh that they were just like pointing device, mouse.
I was going to use my finger.
Well, I use the trackpad a lot, but still, anyway.
Recommended, not minimum.
They recommend a mouse, yeah. So the minimum would be a
trackpad.
You can get CAD on tablets. Don't. It's crap.
Do you reckon?
Oh,
because I'm sure they've been working on it, and I'm sure they've been certainly.
It's better than it was.
Yeah, I saw one which was like actually it's now more ideal for surveys, because you can just draw a line, type in your number, and then that's that.
Yeah, but it's the interface on it's a bit odd. I think you would need a decent keyboard for it, but then you're carrying one with a keyboard.
It's something I'd like to try if I was to get a tablet.
I'll get you a tablet. We'll work it out. That can be something that we get for you from the. If we ever get any money,
please
subscribe to our Patreon.
Subscribe to our Patreon. £1 a month.
Up to £10. That's 3p a day or 30p a day, depending on how you want to do it.
You know what we should do? We should do like a shameless plug count.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just do it in the bottom. You're gonna have to do that for this episode now because you've said it. Bing, bing, bing. That'll have to be the blooper at the beginning. You know what we should do? A shameless plug count. Bing, bing, bing.
Phil, I probably won't.
I think you should.
I'm still trying to work out how to use iMovie.
So we'll move on to we'll move on to SketchUp then. So again, similar process. We'll go through Windows, then we'll go through Windows, then we'll go through Mac. Although strangely enough, it does say, and it says this at the top of it, similar to with the last one where I said they've included mice, that you must use a mouse. In this one, it says you must have an internet connection to install and authorize SketchUp and use some of its features. No shit. So
minimum requirements.
Yeah.
Internet.
Yeah. So the recommended hardware. We'll start with the 2+ gigahertz processor, which is less than CAD for reasons unbeknownst to mankind. Discrete graphics cards, such as the current generation AMD or NVIDIA. 8 gigabytes of RAM. 20 gigabytes of available hard disk space. Or solid state disk space. Then 3D class video card with 1 gigabyte of memory. And then this one recommends a 3-button scroll wheel mouse, which I understand because...
With your 1-button no-wheel mouse. Ooh.
Well, it takes a lot of getting used to using the Magic Mice with SketchUp.
Especially when you start using one that's broken.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
So for Mac, similar things, really. Make sure you've got an internet connection. God. 2.1 gigahertz processor or current generation Apple M1 minimum. So you can then get the Ultra, the Pro, the Max. 8 gigabytes of RAM, 2 gigabytes of available hard disk space. Why is it less on here? Anyway.
It's weird.
I know. 3D class video card with 1 gigabyte memory or higher that supports hardware acceleration. Please ensure that the video card driver supports OpenGL version 3.1 or higher and is up to date. And again, a 3-button scroll wheel mouse, which I generally would have stood behind if I hadn't got used to using one of these, because I used to use a 3-button and it was much easier.
I mean, it's the same concept though, isn't it? Essentially, that is one button but when you click in the right places, it acts as a 3-button.
Well, essentially, but you've kind of there's some nuances to it, and you have to set up to set it up properly
because you can't push.
The scroll wheel. Yeah. That's the problem. So if you want to orbit on SketchUp, you have to hold
click.
Shift, or you have to set up your mouse correctly.
Yeah.
Which until I realised I could do it, was pushing me to the brink of destroying my mouse.
On the only game I've downloaded, which I did try running on here, one of the things is the orbit, but there's no command for that. It's just you click down the scroll wheel.
Yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare. It's one of the things that really annoyed me about when I first started using the Magic Mouse, because I got it for free with one of my computers, so that's why I used it. But before that, I just had a USB 3-button.
Completely wireless mice. Oh, so nice. You don't even have with that as well, because it's Bluetooth. You don't even have to plug in one of the USB connections, which I know you do with most Bluetooth mouths.
Mice.
Wow, let me try that again. You can
do it. I believe in you.
With most Bluetooth mice, you have to plug in like a USB into your laptop to actually allow it to connect. You don't have to do that with the Magic Mice.
The one thing with the Magic Mouse is there's the USB to charge it is on the... again, people watching this on the podcast will be able to see what I'm doing here.
But people on the YouTube will have no clue.
Yeah, not a clue. So we
are doing our best to make this entertaining.
Please subscribe to our Patreon.
Please, £1 a month.
£1 a month, up to
Minimum.
£10, depending on if you want to get rid of some VAT. So the way you charge these Magic Moose is there's a Thunderbolt on the underside of it, which everyone comments on, and I hate it with a thriving passion until I put it down and I go, man, it looks so sleek.
But in fairness, with the Magic Geese,
it takes 5 minutes to charge up. So whilst you go make a coffee or when you go to the bathroom, just plug it in and you're sorted.
And you're sorted.
So
I'm facing the wrong way because I'm embarrassed.
The next most common one I would say is Revit. So we're going to run through Revit, and there is a workaround to get Revit on a Mac. Like I say, Sam, one of my friends, she uses Revit on her Mac, and they just boot camp or parallels. I think she parallels it, not boot camps it, but I used to boot camp it to use it. Right. So with Revit, again, make sure you've got the most up-to-date operating system. CPU type, single or multi-core Intel, Xeon or i-series processor with AMD equivalent and SSE2 technology. You'll know what any of that means. I don't. Okay, you don't know. You've just given me that weird look.
Again, we are so sorry for this.
Yeah, no, this is so dry and miserable.
It's like important. Let's make this clear.
It's important, but my God, is it dry? Yeah.
And it's useful to know. Get a notepad out earlier. Previously, have taken some notes so that you don't have to listen to this again. We're sorry.
I might put time points in the...
That's not a bad shout.
Because then at least you can skip to... Revit Mac, Revit Windows, Revit. Because this is... Anyway, so let's go through this. 8 gigabytes of RAM, usually sufficient for typical editing session for a single model up to approximately 100 megabytes on a disk.
What?
So if your file is 100 megabytes, you only need 8 gig of RAM.
This would be less bad if I wasn't so hungry as well.
Well, just shut up. So, video display, again, minimum 1080p, but it recommends a 4K high definition monitor.
Was that for Revit?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, with Revit you can do a lot more, especially in the 3D stuff. Recommends 30 gigabytes of free disk space. Again, if you're buying anything with 500 to a terabyte, you're going to have that space.
What I'd say is don't get 4K because of CAD, but do get 4K because you're going to be working on more than just CAD.
Yeah, so if you're working on like Enscape, V-Ray, or Lumion, where you need a 4K or you want a 4K monitor, you're going to have one, so don't worry about getting a second one for CAD.
What I'd say is also bear in mind
your spare
that
monitor needs to be if you have CAD on one.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Bear in mind, you might have like one monitor for like just using like SketchUp and CAD, and then the other monitor for using your rendering softwares.
Yeah.
So make sure that like one of your monitors or one of your screens is like 4K, so that you can have that quality when you're rendering.
Yeah, for sure. So,
for sure.
So, sorry, 1 minute. It says browser recommendation: Microsoft Internet Explorer 10 or higher. Nope, not a chance. If I wasn't using a Mac,
Internet Explorer.
Yeah, if I wasn't using a Mac, I would definitely be using Chrome.
Yeah.
Who the hell? That should be standard.
Internet Explorer is still in 2003.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, it's about 20 years behind. So with Mac, there's two options. You can use Parallels, which is a software that dedicates to running a Windows computer within Mac. And I've seen some really cool things. I've never used Parallels. I always boot camped because it was cheaper. So with Parallels, I've even seen ones where they've got the Windows desktop open on half of the Mac screen, the Mac desktop open on the other, and they're dragging files between.
That's quite cool, actually.
That is mind-blowingly cool. So, but I think, as far as I'm aware, especially speaking to Sam and some other people, that's the industry standard that you will use is Parallels, not Boot Camp. Right. So Boot Camp, you start up your computer, and instead of going into Mac OS, you go into Windows OS. So you're not opening Windows OS within Mac OS.
Parallels more of like a browser, isn't it?
To a degree, yeah, and you can just full screen it. It's crazy how that works. And if I'm being honest, I don't fully understand it, even though I was researching it and was just like, this is witchcraft.
Do you have to pay for it?
Yes, that one you have to pay for. Boot Camp,
Do you know how much it is?
I saw it on various levels, but wasn't it?
Because I would like to be able to. But although no, because I'm taking my PS3 back with me. Ancient software, but lovely. And I've got Black Ops 2 now.
So buy now. New license. So a new license will cost you $89.99. I don't know if it's recurring. So Parallels Desktop for home and student use is $89.99 VAT included. Most popular is for developers, testers, and power users, as opposed to power bottoms, is £99.99 per year, and Parallels Desktop Business Edition, great, thanks guys, is 120 quid. I'm not going to bother with the 19.99. So it's not particularly cheap, but by the looks of it, it's per year, so you are paying repeatedly, or you can upgrade it from a previous version for 55 squiderinos. But yeah, it's a crazy piece of tech, and I advise anyone who's got a Mac to actually look into it, because it might save you from, if you've got a Mac from, say, uni days, or you've got one because it's what you prefer, and you start working in a place that only uses Revit or uses things like Lumion, which again only works on Windows. You can then work from home using a software and using something that you like and you're familiar with. So with Mac, there are obviously ways to use, there's requirements to use Parallels, but I think the requirements for Revit were higher than the requirements for Parallels, so I'm just going to run through it that way anyway. So again, make sure you're in the most recent operating system. Make sure you've got 16 gigabytes of RAM, a CPU of 2.7 gigahertz, quad-core Intel i7 or newer. M1 works, and claims in the Parallels spiel, it claims most efficient Parallels so far on the M1, but I think that's just marketing spiel. Yeah, make sure you've got Parallels Desktop 15 as a minimum for Mac or newer. 64-bit Microsoft, Windows 10 or Windows 11. So make sure you're getting the 64, not the 32, and make sure you're getting 10 or 11 as your Microsoft for your Parallels. And again, 8 gigabytes of virtual memory, so 8 gigabytes of RAM, and then your video adapter of 512 megabytes as a minimum, dedicated to the Microsoft Windows Virtual Machine.
Once again, we are just so sorry.
Yeah. Minimum of 40 gigabytes free disk space. Recommends 100 gigabytes free space available anyway, because you'll want to split the two. If you are doing boot camp, you are literally partitioning your drive anyway, so make sure you're dedicating a minimum of 100. I think I used to do 250 when I did mine, because you will have a lot of files on there by the time you're done with it. So that's how I did it. And also it says recommended pointing device of a mouse.
That's a good point. When Phil's saying the minimum disk space, we should probably actually add these up, because the minimum disk space is going to be the combined
of
storage of all of the softwares you plan on downloading.
Plus your files, if you keep them on there.
If you're going to keep your file. So, yeah, I mean, if you plan on keeping your files on, just go for 2 terabyte. But if you plan on using the cloud, consider the fact that you need enough storage in the first place to be able to download everything.
Back when I had my first laptop, the Franken Mac.
Oh,
because for reference, it's because I took it apart and put loads of different bits into it. When I had that, I started with a 500 gig, a half terabyte, and I had a SSD storage device. And at the end of each year, first, second, third year out, for fifth, sixth year, and then my part 3, so 7th year, I just stored them onto that SSD at the end of each year. So I could clear out that MacBook. Otherwise, one of my projects is about 160 gig. So adds up quickly. We're going again.
We're doing this once again. Just before we crack off, we are so sorry.
Yeah.
We're so sorry. Subscribe to our Patreon.
And £1 a month, up to £10 if you want to rate off some VAT. But if you'd like to spend more, just let us know. Email us at askus@backtothedrawingboard.uk. Not .co.uk, but .uk, because apparently someone had taken the other one and isn't using it and wanted to sell me it for, I think it was $4,500 he wanted. So ArchiCAD seems to be the thing at the moment I'm getting a lot of emails about, to the info email, which is like our generic office email. So I'm assuming they're putting some sort of campaign out there. If they're putting some sort of campaign out there and updating it, I imagine more people are going to take them up on that offer. So ArchiCAD, it is recommended that you have a processor of 64-bit. What? Who's going to have less than that anyway? Because I know you can get 32-bit computers. You can get 84 now. I think they're technically 84. With 4 or more cores. Doesn't tell you what type. RAM. For complex, detailed models, 16 or more may be required. So again, start at 16 and work your way up.
Which software are we looking at here?
ArchiCAD 20.
Oh, we've got so much to do.
No. It'll run through pretty quick, to be fair. Yeah. So hard disk space, 5 gigabytes of free disk space, which is Sweet FA, or 10 gigabytes, is required for a more active project. And then display it again, 1080p as the minimum. So moving on to kind of your ancillary stuff. So on this, I'm going to start talking to you about your visuals. I know when I started university, visuals were kind of this guy does visuals. It's more and more common now, especially at uni, but especially in the workplace now.
No, I know. Even within the first project, a lot of my friends and my course mates did a lot of visuals, and we're just trying out, because certainly where I am, it's all about trying out new stuff, which is really good. So everyone's trying out on Photoshop. Everyone's what's that one we were talking about the other day? That little sketching one.
Oh, Procreate.
Yeah, a lot of people are using that, which is cool. But yeah, a lot of people are going for visuals nowadays. Yeah,
and it's becoming more and more important. I mean, I've been doing it for years. I've been doing the virtual headset VR,
ahead of his time,
scan a QR code type thing. So I'm going to move on to those now. So I'm going to start with what is probably the most common, I would say, is Lumion. So for Lumion, this is going to be where things and processing power suddenly jumps. So buckle up. For Lumion, you will need an internet connection, a graphics card.
Should we try doing voices?
No, that's not going to make it any more exciting. If anything, it's going to make it worse.
Yeah, fair.
It just says have up-to-date drivers such as NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2070. Whatever the hell that means. Make sure you've got a graphics card memory of 8 gigabytes or more. Make sure you've got an up-to-date operating system, a CPU.
Make sure you have a CPU.
Yeah.
The AMD Ryzen 5 is really not much, so that's
or an Intel i7, which is
better,
which is Sweet FA. So again, your M1 when we get to Mac will be better than the minimum requirement anyway. You want 32 gigabytes of RAM, again 1080p display, a hard disk drive, it doesn't tell you it does tell you how much space. Sorry, 40 gigabytes of free space. Again, you will have more than that.
You will.
I don't know, actually.
We
Could you buy do you know you said you can customize a Windows computer? Could I get it with less than 40 gigabytes of space?
I genuinely reckon you probably could.
So Lumion again is one of those where it's only available on Windows, so you'll need to parallel or boot camp. So think of it again in that way. V-Ray. So V-Ray is, I don't know, it feels like it's getting phased out more and more because it's not real-time rendering.
Right.
It does a slow
That was what
render.
you used to use, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the quality of their stuff's a lot higher, but it does take a lot of time to do. And then the people, Chaos Group, who own V-Ray have just bought Enscape, which we'll get into in a minute, which is what I now use. So with V-Ray, it is very fun. Which works, I think it works in a very, very similar way to Lumion. If you are using Enscape for SketchUp on the Mac, it's recently released. They are doing more and more work to it, but even the base that they're working from now is fantastic.
Yeah.
So V-Ray, 8 gigabytes of RAM, recommended 16 though. 16 is the minimum. I've had my 32 struggle a bit with that sometimes, especially on really complex models. You want 12 gigabytes for your hard disk space, and then again make sure you've got everything up to date. Now V-Ray only works on certain SketchUps, 19, 20, 21 and 22, and I imagine anything after that, so if you're listening to this in 2025 versions out, it probably works on that as well. So make sure you've got all of that good stuff. And then for the Mac, you'll want to be running an Intel 64, AMD 64, anything like that. Again, you will be able to use the M1s and everything to go with that. RAM of, again, it says 16 gigabytes, but I would really push for 32 on that. I can't see why. I just, for a lot of bigger projects, I really do think you need more than 16. Hard disk space on the Mac, you want 12 gigabytes, and then make sure you've got the most up-to-date operating system, and same SketchUps won't apply, so 19, 20, 21, 22, etc., etc. And then finally, thank God, we're on to Enscape.
We're nearly there, guys. Come on.
We can do this.
If we do actually go with putting timestamps in, which we will try our best to remember to do, hopefully you haven't had to go through the entire slug of this
brutal episode. All right. Operating system, Windows 10 or higher. Graphics, NVIDIA or AMD dedicated GPU with 4 gigabytes VRAM, I'm assuming that's virtual RAM, that supports Vulkan 1.1. I'm not going to read through all that, but essentially make sure you've got a decent graphics card. You want 4 gigabytes of VRAM, and unsupported software is a Radeon 6000 mobile GPUs. So don't try and use Enscape on your phone, apparently. How bizarre.
Can you use Enscape on your phone?
Apparently so. So Enscape works a little bit different, I think, because they've not mentioned it. I couldn't find anything that said anything about having lots of space for it. I don't know if that's because you use it as a plugin for SketchUp. And I assume if you're using it as a plugin for SketchUp, it's a plugin for Rhino or whatever other software you're using, or Revit or whatever. So the operating system for Mac side, Monterey or higher. And with you want to get MacBook Pro 2.6 gigahertz, 6-core Intel i7 as a minimum, or as a recommended, but you can work your way up to the quad cores and the M1s and everything like that. With the Apple M1s, basically all of them are compatible, and in the Apple M2, everything is compatible. So they will work on everything. Like I say, I couldn't seem to find any definitive, it takes up this much space on your drive, because I think a lot of it is online, and a lot of it's kind of, especially when you're going through like the asset library and stuff, it's mostly online.
Yeah.
And again, it's a plugin rather than an application, although it does appear in the applications. 2 seconds.
That's good, but yeah, because it comes up as an app. But then you can't just open Enscape unless you've got SketchUp open.
Yeah, well, what would it generate?
Well, nothing.
So, before we close out, we've done a little bit of maths on what the baseline of what you will need.
Because if there's one thing we want more of, it's
Shit.
numbers.
Yeah, God. Right. So, one of the softwares, because obviously RAM isn't stackable. So, one of the softwares requires 32 gigabytes of RAM. So when you're looking for a computer, I would probably start at the 32. most commonly was 16, but there was one at 32. And if there's one at 32,
Get it.
get it. As in, like, if
No,
you
get that as your minimum.
get that as your minimum, because inevitably you will try all these different softwares probably. So make sure you get your 32 gig of RAM. We worked out that if you were to use a combination of CAD, was it CAD, Revit, and Lumion?
Yes.
You would need 80 gigabytes of storage space on your hard drive.
To actually download them.
Yeah, to download and run them. So obviously put your files on top of that. But if you download materials or if you download textures or furniture or anything like that, you will need more space. Chances are most computers, I know when I look through Macs, it starts at 512. So I imagine most Windows will likely do that as well now. So that's kind of the bare minimum that you need. Obviously, it goes without saying that you're not going to have all of the softwares we've mentioned at once there. So we've picked the combination. So we've put CAD in as an essential, then a 3D, which we use as Revit because it's the highest amount of space. And then we used Lumion because, again, you will want a visualizer to go with that 3D software. Anything on top of that will take up more space. Make sure you've got plenty extra. And then the highest requirement was a 2.6 gigahertz i7, 6 cores, or you just get yourself an M1. So,
thank you for bearing with us. We appreciate that wasn't the most riveting one, but we kind of, when we were thinking about it, we thought actually it could be really useful. A lot of times, like I know when I was looking for a laptop, I had to like scour the internet to try and work out what I'd need, and we figured it could be great to just have one place where you go, this is what everything actually means, and this is what I need. So we figured it, even though it's not the most entertaining, it would be useful.
And if you are going to use any of the other softwares that aren't on here, like Rhino or something like that, you've at least got that base level of knowledge to know, right, okay, I'm looking at Rhino, oh, it needs 32 gig. Well, Phil and Theo said we need 30. Theo and Phil sounds better than Phil and Theo.
Phil and Theo.
Phil and Theo.
Wonton Wicks.
Yeah, Wonton Wicks. So that's that. Thank God. That is the architectural software episode and hardware episode. And thank you for joining us.
Try not to do that ever again.
Well, probably needs refreshed every year. The way things are coming out.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us.
If you've been listening on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you've been watching on the podcast, please leave us a review. Make it a positive one.
5-star is preferable.
We'd love that. We would really like that. Follow us on Instagram at Back to the Drawing Board IG.
Yes, and please consider subscribing to our Patreon. Prices start from as little as £1 a month, which is 3p a day, and up to £10 if you're wanting to dodge some tax. I'm told that you can put podcasts down as an informal CPD, so anyone who is a chartered architect with the RIBA, or as of 2024, an architect with the ARB, can use us as 1 hour every 2 weeks towards their CPD requirements. What an exciting thing.
Amazing. We will see you next time when we return.
I'm not doing it.
Back to the drawing board.
Attaboy.
Oh, thank God that was hard.
Man.
Wow.
Oh,
Jesus. What a challenge that was. Food?
Scran!
Alright.